I'm so scared right now. Because this movie is dog shit. What's up, nerds? Steph here, and today I'm going to be talking about Blair Witch. Blair Witch is a sequel to the 1999 movie The Blair Witch Project, and it takes place 20 years after the events of the first movie. It turns out that Heather, one of the three main characters from the first movie, has a brother. How convenient. So her brother decides to round up a crew and travel into the deep, deep woods of the Black Hills Forest to search for his sister, or at least discover something about her disappearance. His friend also happens to be making a documentary, so they have all sorts of fancy schmancy camera equipment to help capture all of these moments and conveniently make a movie just like the first one. So these unsuspecting college students travel into the woods and then everything goes to shit. Now let me just start by saying I did not want this movie to exist at all. The Blair Witch Project is such a beautiful masterpiece that you can't follow that up with anything. It's just gonna suck. I mean, does anyone remember the straight-to-DVD sequel that they made to this movie? No? Yeah, because it's dog shit. This one isn't much better, although I have seen worse horror movies, I guess. Even if it's not terrible, it's just an unnecessary movie that should not exist. It exists solely on the purpose that they wanted to make money, just like every other sequel and every other reboot and every other remake, and just stop. But I think what I really dislike about this movie is that it doesn't really feel like a sequel. What I mean by that is that it basically just feels like an identical retelling of the original story, but told worse. It's like a remake of the original that's written by mediocre storytellers and filmmakers. Almost everything that happens is identical to what happened in the first movie, and as soon as you start realizing that pattern, you're like, oh, well, I know exactly what's gonna happen, and this is so predictable, and I don't care. And I feel like the people who made this just don't understand what you need to make a good horror movie. Like, yeah, you need the running and the screaming and the fear and everything that happens when the witch is there and you're just freaking out and everyone's like trying to not die. But while you have the running and the screaming, you still need everything in between that. You can't just have a movie that's just that. In the original Blair Witch Project, you had characters who were interesting and who you could understand, and there was a lot of scenes that were very boring and a lot of dialogue and just them talking shit over. And through those moments, you could understand each of these characters and you could feel for them and you could relate to them and you could believe that they're real people. This movie just doesn't really care about that. It's just like, here's a group of stereotypical college kids, now they're all gonna die. There is one thing at the end that I did kind of like, and I really didn't expect it at all. And I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's kind of the only thing that saves this movie for me, because it happened and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And I like suspected that something weird was going on, but I couldn't really quite figure it out, and whenever it was revealed, I was just like, mwah. Now that one moment isn't enough to save the whole movie, but it was a twist that I enjoyed, and it was pretty cool. And I mean, in the midst of all the exaggerated shaky camera shots and the really jarring editing, there were some redeeming qualities that this movie had. No spoilers, but there is this one part where the witch is kind of messing with them and they realize that there's this crazy thing happening with time, and there's a weird sense of time in the way time passes in these woods, and it's really cool. And there's also this horribly disturbing scene involving those wooden voodoo things that she hangs from the trees, and it just kind of made me cringe, and as a horror fan, I really digged that. When I review horror movies, I like to consider a few things. I want to know if the movie scared me, if it made me cringe, if it made me scream, if it made me cover my face like a pussy. And maybe I'm just a big baby, but I did all of those things. There are a few, not many, but a few moments that made me cringe and just feel bleh. And the last 20 or so minutes of the movie was absolutely terrifying to me. Like, even though I knew what was gonna happen because it's just like the first movie, I was still just like, oh no, 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 no. And I mean, even when I watched the first movie, I feel like that. I've seen it like a million times, and every time I watch it, I'm just like, because the concept of the Blair Witch is just so freaking terrifying. It's so scary watching people fear for their lives at something that you never see. Just the pure terror of being alone and fearing what you cannot see in the dark is so scary to me. But we already knew that from the first movie, so watching it for the second time is just not as scary. Now, one thing that I do have a problem with is this. One of the questions that I like to ask is, did it make me scream? And the answer to that is yes, but the reasons that it made me scream make me want to rip my eyes out of my face. Do you really have to mow your lawn right now? Really? This movie has at least 13 13 jump scares. That is 13 too many jump scares. If your movie relies on jump scares to be scary, you are not good at writing a horror movie. I'm sorry, but that is the tackiest thing I've ever seen, especially in regards to a Blair Witch movie, because the original Blair Witch Project had 0 jump scares. The whole point of it was that it was scary because you didn't know what was happening and you didn't know what was there and you couldn't see anything, and it was just the pure dread of seeing these people being hunted by this witch that you never get to see, and I don't understand the point of the movie. And the worst part about it is that there's all these little added sound effects to make you scared and make you jump. And it really takes away from the reality of the situation, because in real life, sounds aren't really that loud and that like bassy. And what makes the original movie so scary is that it feels so real and the sounds feel very realistic, as sounds you would pick up on a crappy video camera. And in that movie there were very little cuts, very little edits, and everything just felt very, very real. This movie also just feels like very exaggerated and very forced. Like there's so many little cuts and edits and it's just rapidly, jarringly edited. And it just doesn't feel like realistic found footage. Some of the things that they film doesn't seem like realistically they would film that, and it's just like they put it there so they could have it in the movie. And in the original movie, Heather is passionate about making this documentary. Like, she is so passionate about it, and you can tell by every word that comes out of her annoying mouth. But in this movie, you can tell that they don't really care so much. Like the brother obviously cares about finding his sister, but he doesn't really care about the documentary. This other girl apparently cares about making a documentary, but it's not like a passion project like it was in the first movie. So when they're running for their lives and they're still filming it, you're just like, what are you doing? Drop the camera and run, you dumbass. And where the hell did they get all this equipment anyways? Like, how are they affording this? They have earpiece cameras, they have a pretty nice DSLR camera, they have a fucking drone. It's like thousands of dollars of equipment right there. Like, who are you people? And when someone breaks it or it falls down or it gets lost, they're just like, oh well. In the first movie, they are constantly worried about dropping something or losing something or breaking something, and their equipment isn't even that great, but they worry about it because that's realistic. This movie is so unrealistic. And in their defense, it is really hard to follow something up like the Blair Witch Project. Part of what made that movie so scary is that it was like pitched as being real, and it felt so real. The way it was advertised made it look like it was actual found footage that you could go and see in the theater. A lot of people were extremely convinced that this was a real thing that happened, this was a real piece of found footage, and people were fucking terrified. It's honestly one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And the experience of going to see it with that mindset, thinking that this is actual real found footage, is just terrifying. And it's just impossible to make a sequel like that because we know that this isn't real found footage because we saw the original, and you can't do it again. You just can't. The sequel doesn't give any new information aside from the like timey-wimey stuff that goes on, but it doesn't really expand on the legend of the Blair Witch, and to me that's kind of a missed opportunity, thus making this movie totally pointless. Also, the original story takes place in 1994. This story takes place in 2014. That is 20 years. You waited 20 years to look for your sister? 20 years? Why is now the time to look for her? To just wake up and go, oh, I think I'm gonna go look for my sister today. What went wrong in your brain that makes you think she's still there after 20 years? Do you even remember her? Were you even born when this was happening? That's 20 years. How old are your parents that you have a 20-year gap between you and your sister? I have so many questions that need answering. Seriously, this movie felt so forced. The Blair Witch Project did not need a sequel. Maybe this movie would be okay if I hadn't seen the original. Maybe it would be interesting if I had no idea what was gonna happen. But I mean, if you want to see this movie and you haven't seen the original, just watch the original. It's basically the same movie told much, much better, because it's just a much better version of the exact same thing. So yeah, Blair Witch, pretty much just a crappy version of the original movie. Go watch the original. It's a masterpiece. Did you see Blair Witch? Let me know in the comments what you thought about it, and let me know what your favorite horror movie is. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, and until next time, I'm Steph Koza, and this is Rated N.